General Perez de Cuellar, who left Baghdad tonight offering no signs of a breakthrough.
I have always said that I never optimistic, neither optimistic nor pessimist, but always hopeful.
De Cuellar's mission did seem to have new hope last night when President Bush said for the first time that he would accept the idea of a UN conference on the other problems of the Middle East. Presumably that includes the Palestinian question, and he has no objection to a UN force in the Persian Gulf. But first, he wants the Iraqis out of Kuwait. NBC's John Cochran is at the White House tonight on the Crisis Watch. John, what's the latest there?
Tom, the president called his top national security advisors here to the White House tonight to get their latest reading on what Saddam Hussein's next move is likely to be. The advisors I have talked to admit they just don't know. The president's advisors also came to the White House to give their latest assessment of troop readiness to go to war this week, if that is what he wants. The administration has worked hard in the past few weeks to persuade Saddam Hussein that reports are wrong that the U.S. will not be ready for war until mid-February. When the president returned from Camp David today, he was asked what message he had for Americans who implore him not to go to war.
We've got to do what we have to do, and the Congress has affirmed that position, and I think that is, one of the arguments that some made is, well, please get Congress engaged. Why are you not willing to go to Congress? We went to Congress, and Congress, both houses of the Congress, affirmed the policies of this government.
This evening, American diplomats from the now-closed embassy in Baghdad came home, arriving in Washington. They, at least, will be out of harm's way if war comes. Although White House aides doubt war can be avoided, one of them said on NBC's Meet the Press that Saddam Hussein may still choose survival over annihilation.
There are a lot of people who say this man is not a man with a martyr complex. If he has a complex, it's a power complex. And therefore one doesn't give up everything to go down in flames for a particular cause. And that if it comes to that, he may want to save what he can for the future.
Saddam may already have decided, and UN Secretary General Perez de Cuellar may know Saddam's decision. But President Bush is still waiting on a report from his old friend, Perez de Cuellar, on just how well or how badly his talks with Saddam went. Tom?
John, we had a report tonight from Baghdad that Saddam Hussein addressed a group of journalists there, and he said only about the de Cuellar meeting, we presented our ideas. Don't you think that if de Cuellar had some kind of a breakthrough, he already would have been in touch with the president? So no call is a more ominous sign?
Well, they find it ominous here that Perez de Cuellar didn't call. They also find it strange. However, Perez de Cuellar is representing all of the United Nations, all the people who voted on those resolutions against Saddam Hussein. Perhaps he's worried about the diplomatic niceties of calling George Bush and not calling the others first. They now expect here at the White House to hear from Perez de Cuellar possibly tomorrow morning. Perez de Cuellar will be in Paris, Tom.
And John Cochran, if the Perez de Cuellar mission fails, are there any other initiatives on the horizon that the White House knows about?
Well, one possibility is Mikhail Gorbachev may send a man down to the Gulf. Gorbachev had hinted that in a telephone conversation he had with George Bush on Friday. Gorbachev has got his hands full, however. He's been cracking down in Lithuania. There has been bloodshed there. George Bush spoke about that today. He condemned the violence there, but he still said he did not think it would in any way affect Gorbachev's support for Bush's Gulf policy, Tom.
All right, John, well, I do have some late news on the Gorbachev idea for peace in the Middle East. A top Iraqi official told me they had not even heard from Mikhail Gorbachev. I've just returned from Baghdad, where there is a growing anxiety about that Tuesday deadline. Anxiety, but no signs of abandoning Saddam's call to fight if called on.
At Baghdad University, it was a routine morning of Sunday classes. No visible signs that war may be soon. But teacher and student alike were of one opinion. If it does come to war.
And I'm ready to sacrifice my life and my children. I've got 3 girls, 3 little girls. I'm ready to sacrifice my life and my children for my cause.
We must be careful.
Latif Jasm is the Iraqi information minister and one of Saddam Hussein's most militant advisors. He was in an unforgiving mood when I asked him about what happens if there is war.
If the war will begin, you must know that Israel will be included in this war. and the whole region will change.
Finally, Minister, let me ask you what many people have come to believe now, that your country and your president has been backed into a corner, and the only way out for him to save face is to have a war. Is it worth that?
This is a great mistake. It's a great mistake, and wrong. We are not in the corner, and we don't want the war. We hope that the peace will be realized. And those who say this speak, they want the war.
That threat to attack Israel if Iraq is attacked is now routine with Iraqi officials. They hope that prospect will weaken America's Arab alliance. After consulting with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger, top Israeli officials said today that they will never give up their right to decide when and how to defend themselves. And caught in the middle of all of this is this country, Jordan. Tonight, I asked King Hussein of Jordan if he had any realistic hope that war can be avoided.
I honestly can't answer this question other than to say that one must entertain hope and keep it alive until there is no chance to persevere in that direction.
If Saddam Hussein were to call you tonight and say, I believe that Iraq can withstand an attack and ultimately be a victor over the forces that have been assembled against us, how would you advise him? Do you think that that's prudent thinking on his part?
I honestly don't think there can be a victor in this struggle. And I believe that the losers will be all of us in the region and maybe in the world as a whole.
Of course, it's not clear tonight that Saddam Hussein is asking the advice of anyone outside his small, tight circle of loyalists. What could be going through his mind at this hour? Brian Gumbel, you're there in New York with someone who may have a clue.
Well, thanks very much, Tom. Good evening. Good evening. As you have noted, last-minute appeals to Saddam Hussein, it would seem, have fallen on deaf ears. Over the past few months, we have tried to examine just what makes the man tick. Towards that end, this evening, we'd now like to welcome Edward Peck, as chief of the Iraqi mission. Between 77 and 80, Ambassador Peck came to know Saddam Hussein as well as any American. Good evening, Mr. Ambassador. These last-minute entreaties, be they French, UN-inspired, or Moscow-inspired, is the Iraqi president likely to view them as points of serious discussion or points of weakness?
It's always so difficult to tell with a man like that. I would guess that he looks upon them as last-minute efforts on our part to avoid the kind of conflict which we have made it clear we would like to avoid.
All of our movements are based on the assumption, it would seem, that he's afraid of war. Is that a valid assumption?
I'm not sure. I don't think that he considers war to be the worst possible outcome. For him, it may be a matter of survival. He could be wrong, but a judgment call on his part might be that were he to pull out, a sign of weakness, it might mean the end of him and his regime.
We heard Tom talk a little bit of Saddam Hussein being cornered internationally. Is he likely to view himself as being cornered, as being in a bind, as being trapped?
I don't think so. He has been on his own for so long that the idea of Saddam Hussein feeling isolated in the international community, I think, either A, doesn't matter, or B, is not something that he's aware of.
So what does he want diplomatically? Where does he go from here?
If you look at what Iraq is all about and the objectives of the Ba'athi Party, the unification of the Arab world has always been its #1 objective, and he's on that road. In taking back what they consider to be a former part of their own country, he's taken a giant step towards achieving what the Iraqis have always believed in, the Ba'athi Iraqis.
Could he walk away from that, still say he won, and make believers of others in the Arab world?
That's a tough call. I don't know. I don't think he could. He's been so firm and so strong and so unshaken thus far that something significant would have to occur before he could claim victory without actually having a victory.
I know Tom Brokaw has wanted in on this. Tom, you've been listening to this. Your insights?
Well, and I was also struck in Baghdad this weekend by the demand for respect on the part of all the Iraqi officials and the part of the Americans. They want that. And is it too bizarre to imagine, Ambassador Peck, that maybe Saddam Hussein is willing to be a martyr in all of this?
Yeah, you know, it's one of the things that's so difficult for us to understand because he thinks about these things more differently than we do. He's had a brilliant, successful career if thuggery is what you want to do for a living. And I suppose that he could imagine himself going on to the rewards of martyrdom without great fear. He's probably convinced long since that he's not going to die in a bed somewhere comfortably.
We've only got time for a couple of quick questions. Should we expect, following the Tuesday deadline, if nothing's changed, should we expect some movement on his part, some effort to divide the coalition still, some effort to stall for time?
Yeah, he could do some things that might try to divide the coalition. The Israeli card is one that he keeps saying he's going to play. It's not clear just how he would do it or where he would do it. He's also raised the specter of worldwide terrorism against Americans and their allies. He could do certain things in a last-minute effort to avoid the kind of doom that he faces.
You know the man. Final note. Do you think he'll blink?
I'm afraid he will not.
Ambassador Peck, thanks very much.
Pleasure, sir.
We're going to continue. There's still much more ahead on this NBC News special. Throughout this evening, we're going to find out how some Americans feel about the possibility of war. When we come back, we'll check America's mood.
I've lived through World War II. My husband's a vet, and I don't know if people realize amongst the younger generation how awful war is.
Some mothers might lose their sons or daughters or whatever, and I don't think they should go to war.
We are definitely going to have to face that man sometime, and I think now is the time.
I think the president has a lot of support, but I think that support might change when people actually start dying.
If I owned a car company, first I'd snag the biggest office, then build myself a sports sedan. I'd make the body aerodynamic, like even the door handles would be cool. Then I'd give it a 16-valve engine. And just to cheese off the other car companies, I'd make my sports sedan affordable. Because I'm tired of the rich guys having all the fun.
Introducing the all-new Nissan Sentra, the first affordable sports sedan.
Did you know it's tough getting business people to agree on what's best? Yet business people do agree. Nobody beats AT&T when it comes to long-distance service. In an independent poll where users rated their carriers, AT&T was unsurpassed in the best technology and best service categories and was voted #1 in overall satisfaction. So now that we've agreed on AT&T, it's back to business as usual. Quality, another AT&T advantage.
Are we having orange juice with breakfast?
Daddy, of course we are.
Oh, these aren't the little glasses I'm used to.
Orange juice is good for you. Have a big glass.
Orange juice. It's got the vitamins, minerals, and taste that make you feel so good.
No bacon and eggs?
Nope. Bulgur wheat muffins.
100% pure, Florida quality orange juice. It makes you feel so good.
I'll have seconds.
Another muffin?
No, orange juice.
Oh.
Clarette's Gum, now in wintergreen.
If this is a cold, this is the flu. Cold, flu. When you've got more than a cold, you need Metaflu. Flu strength relief from 4 strong medicines. For more than a cold, for the flu, Metaflu.
Kids don't worry about cholesterol. They don't care about fat or even think about tropical oils. They just want something sweet. So you have to worry about all the things they don't. That's why Hostess created light Twinkies and cream-filled cupcakes. They're 94% fat-free with no cholesterol or tropical oils, which will put your mind at ease, even if your kids couldn't care less. Hostess, the sweet snacks you can say yes to.
He can seduce with his voice.
We shall be together again.
And kill with his kiss.
I've got a madman out there.
It was a tragic
Accident. One child knows the dangers.
He's evil. Who's evil? Cousin Barnabas.
One man knows the secret.
Barnabas Collins walks as one of the living dead.
An innocent woman could be his next prey.
Barnabas?
You can't go down there!
He'll destroy you. He destroys everything he touches.
Dark Shadows, the movie, tonight on NBC.
The most painful agonizing about whether to go to war is not among the generals or the pundits and the politicians, often among the moms and the dads and the sisters and the brothers. Ordinary citizens with something to say. As NBC's Garrick Utley in New York has discovered, the crisis is on the mind of just about everyone. Garrick?
Tom, of course we cannot precisely measure the mood of the nation at this time of testing, but we can all sense it, sense the mixture of support for, opposition to, and above all, the apprehension about what we may be getting into. What American has been able to escape this crisis? Not the millions of pro football fans tuned into the post-game show following yesterday's playoff game and instead heard the president.
The 15th is a very real deadline.
Not these Florida schoolgirls who have been getting letters from the troops in the Gulf.
But I hope that you take the time to realize that what America is doing is the right thing.
Not the home buyers, store owners, and stock market players who have had to shift investments or cancel purchases or slash prices because of the economic uncertainty intensified by the crisis. As the January 15th deadline grows perilously close, we have been consumed by what may happen.
What would your advice be to the president?
Well, not to have a war.
Listen to Michael Jackson, a California talk show host.
In talk radio 30 years, I have not seen one single subject so totally immediately dominate.
Psychologist Ellen McGrath.
Having a specific date causes much more anxiety because people really feel as if it's the edge of the cliff, and at that date, all of us are going to fall over.
Ever since the crisis began, we have seen and heard from the parents and the wives and the husbands of the nearly 400,000 Americans deployed in the Gulf, and the children.
How do you feel about that, your mom in Saudi Arabia?
Feel like I'm going to cry.
Many other Americans feel they may be losing something too. Airline passengers who wonder if they may be at risk because of a terrorist threat our government says is real. 2.5 million Arab Americans, many of whom now think they are the unfair targets of suspicion.
Just because of your ethnicity, the FBI is going to come and ask you questions. I think that's totally ridiculous, and it's out of line.
The black Americans who say their young men are disproportionately represented on the front lines because they can't get jobs as civilians. The loudest voices come from the opposition. The less vocal, less visible majority supports the president, but is deeply concerned about what will happen. It has come down to this.
So let us just pray.
We now petition you, O God, to some way and somehow sustain peace in the Persian Gulf.
And that is just what millions of Americans across the country were doing on this Sunday. America on this Sunday. It has been said very often that a nation should not go to war unless the goal is absolutely clear. The military means, the weapons, and the men are ready, and also unless the nation is solidly behind the effort and perhaps the sacrifice that is needed. All the surveys that have been done these past weeks and months show that the majority of Americans stand behind the president, but are we solidly behind him? That is something he and we can discover only if and when it actually comes to war. Bryant?
Well, Garrick, the Bush administration has warned Saddam Hussein that he should not mistake differing American voices for a divided America. Clearly, as we approach the UN deadline and the growing possibility of war, there are plenty of differing voices out there. To hear some of them, we're set to move around the country this evening to hear from Americans of all stripes, starting with Keith Morrison, who's in Southern California in the parking lot of the LA Coliseum. Ann Curry is in Chicago, and Catherine Kirk is in Norfolk. First to NBC's Keith Morrison, where the folks are celebrating the Raiders' entry into the AFC Championship game. Anybody out there lucid enough to help you out, Keith?
They're lucid, Brian. I'll tell you, the only really scientific survey you could get here is how people feel about football. There's no question about that. However, I must say I was surprised, Brian. I came to this game expecting more of a unanimity of point of view about whether or not this nation should go to war than I found. In fact, I was expecting to find in this crowd more people who felt that we should. I got views that were really split pretty much down the middle. I found that more men felt that we should than women. I found that more whites felt we should be at war than blacks. we have some people here now who are prepared to give us our points of view. Jim, you were telling me earlier that you are in favor of of war. You feel we should.
Yes, I think that we should be there just because it's not a question of oil. It's a question of freedom against aggression. And if Saddam Hussein would have went against another country, we would have been in there, taken it back, and we would have been out of there by now.
All right, thank you, Jim. And another Jim, you don't agree with that point of view? Don't think we should be there?
No, I really don't. I think while it's the ultimate hour here, obviously, I think we need to demonstrate the best that's in us all, and that means diplomacy with some tact and patience. And so I think we need to let sanctions work.
All right, thank you. And as we were saying earlier, families, often women especially, did not believe, Brian, that we should be doing what we're doing. What do you two feel about it?
I feel that our troops really shouldn't be over there. It's about oil. And I'm very concerned about the family that is over there, and I don't feel we should be on the front line.
You might have to go. How do you feel about it?
I don't want to go. I'm more concerned with my family, and if I do go, I don't know my chance of returning. So we should let sanctions work first. I think so.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all. Brian, today people came to a football game and got some release from a situation which has obviously caused a good deal of people some pain. But they are saying that though they got release, they aren't sure what we should be doing, if you talk to all of them. Brian?
Well, Keith, thanks very much. I think no one should confuse the celebration out there either with the seriousness of purpose of the issue involved. Let's go to Ann Curry in Chicago. She's at a restaurant on the near north side. Ann, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. Listen, the Persian Gulf is the hot topic of conversation here at this restaurant called Bub City here in Chicago, and we've interrupted Sunday dinner for 3 people gracious enough to talk to us about all of this. They are John Rogers, an investment manager, Isa Jablo, a receptionist, and her grandson, Brad Albin, a college student here in Chicago. John, first let me ask you, America is on the verge of sending its sons and daughters to a war with Saddam Hussein. Do you approve or disapprove?
I think ultimately, if Saddam Hussein decides to stay in Kuwait, we do have to go there. And I feel positively it's the right thing to do for us to go over there and help that situation.
Do you feel that the president has done everything he could diplomatically to prevent a war?
I think he's done most everything, even though sometimes I wish that Jim Baker had had the time to go over and talk to them face to face.
All right. Isa, let me ask you. You are a grandmother of 2 sons, or two grandsons who could be drafted, face possible military conflict. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I feel very bad that if they would have to go, and yet I have very mixed feelings because this is their country and they would have to go, but I'm very concerned for them.
Do you think that there will be a war?
I really don't know. I hope there isn't. I hope at the last minute they all back up.
You told me earlier that you and your family have been talking about this and are very concerned about the price that could be paid.
Yes, we are.
Your daughter has been losing sleep. Tell me about that.
Yeah, my daughter has been up all night. She had a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old son, and she's very concerned about them, what their future is, and all parents who have children that age, I think, are very concerned.
Do you support the possibility of war, then? Do you basically say that we have to do something about Saddam Hussein?
I think we have to put him down. I really do, because if not, it's going to be terrible for the rest of the world.
Brad, we don't have a lot of time, but let me ask you very quickly. You're a college student. What do you think about the possibility of fighting Iraqi soldiers?
I find it very scary. I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily support the war, but I do feel it as my duty as an American to go to war. But right now it's a very scary time for a lot of college students. We just don't know what's going on, and I mean, there's a good possibility that we could be drafted.
All right. Thanks all of you for letting us interrupt your supper. There you go. Mixed views here from Chicago about the possibility of war in the Persian Gulf. Brian?
And thanks very much. Let's move southeast now to Norfolk, Virginia, where Catherine Kirk is standing by with 2 anxious families. Good evening, Katie.
Good evening, Brian. Joining me is Nancy, who asked that we not use her last name because of safety considerations. Her husband, Rick, is a commander aboard the USS Kennedy, which is currently in the Red Sea. Also joining us is Bill Koba, whose wife, Maureen, is a nurse at Fleet Hospital number 5 in Saudi Arabia. Nancy, with the deadline 2 days away, how are you coping?
Well, I'm trying to keep upbeat and just continue on normally. It's always in our thoughts. It's like a big cloud hanging over your head, but just try and keep a little bit of humor in your day and just do the best you can.
I know you're keeping very active physically.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing, and how is that helping you?
Well, I teach jazzercise, and I consume a lot of my energy into that, and then I run. And I just like to do physical things to help relieve the stress of the situation.
I know you mentioned to me earlier you're angry about some of the anti-war protests that are going on. Why is that?
Well, I just believe that right now, I mean, the people out there are scared, the men and the women, and they need all the support that they can get. I mean, they don't want to fight either, but they know it's their job, and they're going to put all their energies to it, and that's what we need to do.
And quickly, how's Kellen getting along?
He's doing pretty well. He's, you know, misses his father very much, but he knows that that's what his dad, you know, his job is, and he supports him too.
Bill, how are you and Elizabeth and Nicholas getting along at this a time of anguish?
Well, we're quite anxious, uncertain, I think, like many of the people in the country. We're trying to focus on getting through the day-to-day routine, Nicholas with school and I with work, and trying to make each day come and go as quickly as we can, knowing that time is decreasing real quickly right now.
And what are you telling your kids about what will happen?
Well, I'm trying to gear them up for a war in the Middle East, and the fact that their mother will be extremely busy, that she'll be taking care of a lot of the people that come through her hospital, and that she has to be in our prayers at all times to help those and help herself.
Well, Bill, Nancy, thank you both for joining us this evening. You're in our thoughts and prayers as well. Brian, back to you.
All right. Katie Couric in Norfolk, Ann Roberts in Chicago, Keith Morris in Los Angeles. Thank you all very much. Among those who have been listening to what those Americans had to say is a gentleman who joins us now from Washington, Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell. And Senator, thank you very much for being with us. Good evening.
Good evening, Brian.
It seems clear that most Americans want to support the president, but they also want to avoid war. It seems clear that the support is broad. How deep is it?
Well, of course, it's deep among some, but not among others. Nationally, I think there is a great sense of unease, a great sense of concern when you get into a situation where the president, representing the whole nation, feels he has to have a credible threat of force. People want to support that. They're concerned that he'll now have to carry out the threat to make war. That, I think, is the principal reason for the unease and concern.
Do you think this country's ready for war psychologically?
Well, there are very deep divisions in the country. We debated them in the Congress over the past several days. I think once a war starts, if it does, I hope it doesn't, but if it does, I think Americans will unite, certainly behind the armed forces. There's never been any doubt about the support that the Congress and the American people have for the men and women in the Persian Gulf now.
You wound up giving, when I say you, I mean the Congress, wound up giving the president authorization for war. Does it amount to a blank check?
It is a blank check. It's an unlimited blank check that gives the president the authority to initiate war at any time of his choosing and under any circumstances which he chooses. That's one reason I voted against it. I do not rule out the use of force. It may well become necessary. But I think prematurely abandoning the sanctions policy which he himself had established before it had had a fair chance to work may mean going to war prematurely and unnecessarily. That's the hard part.
Is it an open-ended authorization, Senator? If the mood of the country should change, if the circumstances should change, does the authority to go to war change?
Well, it would take further action to change that. I think that's extremely unlikely. The president has given every indication of moving promptly, and although the vote in the Senate was quite close, therefore hardly a mandate, I think the president, if he does what he says he's going to do, and we have no reason to doubt that, he's likely to initiate military action very soon.
So as the crisis evolves, how do you see your ongoing role in that of the Senate?
Well, obviously, first and foremost, if hostilities occur, we will fully support in every way necessary the American men and women whose lives are at risk in this situation. That's the first requirement, one in which I think there is no disagreement.
From Amman, I think Tom Brokaw has a question for you, Senator.
All right.
Tom?
Senator, is it possible that historians are going to look back on this moment and say that men and women lost control and that events began to take over, events like deadlines of January 15th and even the rhetoric from some of the politicians on both sides of this fight?
That is, of course, possible. We still hope that war can be averted. I think the major error in the administration's policy was the doubling of our force without any prior consultation with Congress or anyone else, without any notice to the American people, thereby requiring the use of force at an early date before the sanctions had an opportunity to work fully and fairly and achieve the desired result without war. I think the fatal decision was made back a couple of months ago, and now, as in a most unfortunate circumstance, logistics are driving policy instead of the other way around.
Senator Mitchell, as you know, no one's talking potential casualties, no one's talking total costs. If both of those were being spoken of more openly, perhaps even honestly, might we see a different attitude?
Well, I think the problem with talking casualties is no one really knows. I've had a number of military briefings, and they range all the way from a possibility of a very quick war with light casualties to a long war with very many thousands of casualties. It depends to a large extent upon the reaction of the Iraqi military. If they break early under the psychological effect of a massive air attack, or whether they hold firm and require some form of ground action to dislodge them. It's unpredictable. Nobody knows for certain. That is, of course, the great risk in this course of action, the uncertainty, no one knowing. The cost is astronomical. It's billions of dollars already, and it's going to be many billions more. But really and truly, when you get right down to it, it isn't the cost. All that money doesn't mean much. It's the human life at stake. For a father, for a mother, for a wife, for a son, that life, the life of their loved one, is not possible to have placed a value on it, and it shouldn't be.
Senator George Mitchell, it's been a difficult weekend for you and a busy one. We thank you for closing it out with us. Thank you very much.
Brian.
Let's go back right now to Amman Jordan. Tom Brokaw once again. Tom.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Senator Mitchell. When we come back in a moment, we'll be checking in with our troops on the battle line in the Persian Gulf. If war comes, will they be ready?
Very strong, and he has told me that he is ready. He said, I want to go in and kick butt and come home.
I think about a lot of stuff. I think about what might happen. But I have faith in these guys and my leaders, and we're ready.
No question in my mind at all that we're going to really kick some butt. We're going to do real well.
I believe that I will not hesitate when I'm challenged.
Well, it'd be nice to end peacefully, but then sometimes it's not always so.
The Lexus LS400 is equipped with a very sophisticated suspension system, which makes it seem like it's riding on rails, even when it's not.
Got a painful cold? Gotta get relief? Get Alka-Seltzer Plus cold medicine. It relieves painful cold symptoms some others miss with a decongestant, antihistamine, and a pain reliever you can't find in any other leading cold medicine. The pain's gone. Ah, I can breathe.
Everything feels better, better, better.
Alka-Seltzer Plus cold medicine. Relief for your painful cold. And now for sinus and allergy relief, try new Alka-Seltzer Plus sinus allergy medicine.
This week on Today, we'll talk of peace and of war and keep our eye on the latest developments in Persian Gulf.
We'll also visit with Jerry Seinfeld and Michael Keaton and rock and roll with newcomers to the Music Hall of Fame.
All that and some special birthday celebrations. George Burns' 95th and a Today Show's 39th.
Join us this week on Today.
Bull's asked to be on a game show, and when he's too scared to do it, Dan tries hypnosis.
Well, congratulations, Dan. You got yourself a 2-ton paperweight.
But Bull goes wild, and Dan goes to jail, so it's up to Christine to put him under.
All right, Bull, you will be completely relaxed and confident when you hear these words.
I want to be your love slave. Bull's in Final Jeopardy on the next Night Court.
Monday evening at 7:30 on KMTR. KMTR News, tonight at 6 and 11.
America, Are We Ready for War continues. Here again is Tom Brokaw.
More than 1 million troops, 400,000 of them American, are now poised for war in the Gulf. Support units are also getting ready. If shooting starts, there are sure to be many casualties, more than could possibly be handled in the field. Some injured soldiers have already been sent to Wiesbaden, Germany, the American Medical Command Center in Europe, which oversees American military hospitals in that area. Should the number of American casualties make it impossible to treat all of them there, German civilian hospitals will also take care of American troops. As for the troops in Saudi Arabia, are they ready for war tonight? Some might say too ready. NBC's Arthur Kent tonight has more on that from the Gulf.
They have many miles behind them. But for most of these troops, coming this far has been a journey into themselves, a discovery of personal strength and weakness. Now these young people realize what their final destination could be.
I see the war developing around me more or less, but I still just hope for peace.
Hope lingers somewhere on this damp Sunday in Saudi Arabia. But among these troops waiting for transport, the greater hope now is no longer to avoid war, but to just get it behind them.
It's time to get a show on the road and get it over with.
Outside in the rain, the prelude to war. Troop trucks head up the highway towards Kuwait. Heavy armor is hauled up to join them.
Let's go, move!
The momentum toward war was triggered with the announcement of the January 15th deadline. Gradually, U.S. and British troops appear to have both resigned themselves to the likelihood of war with Iraq and hardened themselves for it.
My goal is basically to do as much damage as them and bring everybody home, and I'm sure we will.
I don't think anybody looks forward to going to war, but we're obviously anxious to get it over with, you know, get back home.
With live fire exercises like this British night assault, commanders have drilled readiness into their soldiers. U.S. ground commanders in particular have had a constant battle to fight with sagging morale. They've fought back with intensive training to build confidence and spirit. And that's paid off.
We're thoroughly trained and ready to fight.
They feel ready, but they will clearly go into battle with something seasoned combat veterans say should be left behind: impatience.
Basically, we're just tired of sitting around. We want to do something. We want to get something started.
We're all not anxious to go to war, but we're just anxious to rewind this thing up and get back home.
There's peace talks and those get shot down. And the more we keep going back and forth, the longer we're going to stay here. So I realized, you know, as soon as we start something, I'll go home. So I'm just, you know, let's just get it over with.
I'm really ready for the deadline to get here. I'm tired of living in this mess. I'd rather go ahead and just kick off where we can get it over with one way or the other.
Field commanders are pleased that U.S. morale is on the upswing, but soldiers who've been through combat will tell you that impatience can be a real handicap. Time is distorted in war. Objectives take a lot longer to achieve than first imagined. So if war actually breaks out here, commanders will have to keep a close eye on the state of mind of their troops and guide them through battle. Tom?
Thank you, Arthur Kent, tonight in the Persian Gulf. And of course, the specific positions of units of Operation Desert Shield are a military secret. Well, we do have a pretty good idea tonight of the components of the multinational force and the Iraqi troops that are massed in Kuwait and beyond. Our Pentagon correspondent Fred Francis now gives us an overview of this military matchup.
In the past decade, Iraq has spent $100 billion on military hardware, not just in its effort to defeat Iran, but to make the Arab nation a world power. But is the Iraqi military too big to fight, too large to supply, and too old to win? To the layman, the face-off over Kuwait looks like an even match. The alliance has 525,000 men. Iraq has 540,000 soldiers ready. The alliance has 2,800 tanks. Iraq has 4,000 in the theater. The alliance air force is 2,500 strong, while Iraq has 700 warplanes. But the quality of Iraq's weapons and men diminishes the threat. Of all of Iraq's soldiers, only the Republican Guards, 150,000 men, are professional warriors. Most of Iraq's tanks are 2 decades old. Only 500 of them are state-of-the-art. In air power, Iraqi pilots are flying worn, outmoded warplanes. Only 148 of its French and Soviet jets are modern. What Iraq does have that concerns military leaders is artillery, 3,300 pieces, which can fire poison gas, and hundreds of short and medium-range missiles, and shoulder-fired missiles to strike Allied aircraft. U.S. leaders plan to spend 2 weeks using air power in an effort to destroy those threats. Air power will also seek to destroy all Iraqi communications and supply depots, all military field headquarters, and many of the tanks Iraq is holding in reserve. One general said if we pummel them for up to 2 weeks, U.S. ground forces may not have to fight.
That rosy prediction of a 2-week war is the result of 5 months of intelligence gathering from spies and spy satellites, from defectors and defense contractors who once served Saddam. There may be a touch of bravado in that assessment, but senior military leaders here privately insist that the Iraqis are just not good enough to last very long. Bryant?
All right, Fred Francis, thank you. Retired Lieutenant General William Odom is a military analyst, and he's joined us over here at what we're calling our terrain map to look at some possibilities. Before we get to it, let's talk about what Fred said, the rosy predictions, perhaps no ground war, perhaps a 2 or 3 week conflict. What do you think of that possibility?
That's certainly possible, but it seems to me that the leadership in the Pentagon has taken into account that that might not be the case. The forces deployed there and the preparations that have been made, I think, could easily manage a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 month campaign. I would like to see it that short, but I think it could easily go into a considerably longer period.
I know you see an operation in 3 phases. Can you outline them for us briefly?
Well, I think the logic militarily would be an initial phase, who knows how long, maybe 2 weeks, in which the air targets and the Scud missiles in all of Iraq and Kuwait would be the main target of attack. And the Scuds and the air would have to be the first and the highest priority target. Then as they're destroyed, the rest of the air defenses would be destroyed. And that will take a great deal of time to work it out because they're spread out with the tactical forces. At the same time, or during that period, I would expect to see intensive bombing of command and control centers, of supply depots, of support facilities, and also of the frontline troops down here which defend along the Saudi-Kuwaiti border. In other words, I would expect to see a number of things going simultaneously. But the highest priority is to get rid of the Scud. Then as that campaign comes to an end, if the Iraqis are still defending, there will have to be a breakthrough or some sort of penetration through these lines down in the south. Now, those defensive positions have been very well prepared. They are deep, they have mines, they have trenches, they have obstacles, and then soldiers and tanks behind them. And it is not only one line of that kind of preparedness, but there are successive lines behind. Breaking through that will be the second phase of the operation. Once the breakthrough can be achieved, then I would expect U.S. armor forces to come north, deep into Kuwait, probably into southern Iraq, to destroy the remaining armor reserves of the Iraqi forces.
By that point, what kind of a force would the Iraqis have left? How vulnerable are those Soviet T-72s that are deployed in Kuwait?
Well,
to saturation bombing, for example.
I think a few of them will be destroyed with the saturation bombing, but the armor equipment will probably survive. A fair amount of that will survive. I think a lot of the unprotected artillery of that does not have armor protection around it, the command and control headquarters, the stocks of ammunition and POL, those kinds of things will be destroyed in the saturation bombing.
The scenario that you outlined, does it involve heavy casualties?
It certainly involves heavy casualties for the Iraqis in that initial campaign.
And for the Americans?
It depends on how long it goes, and it also depends on how successful that breakthrough is. If this breakthrough is fairly successful here, then I think the number of U.S. casualties will be considerably less or smaller than some of the predictions.
We've outlined the areas where U.S. forces enjoy great strength. Where are we most vulnerable?
I think it's an unusual and extraordinary challenge for our commanders to coordinate all this activity. If the coordination goes well, then I think the war will go very effectively for the U.S. side. Failures in the command and control and coordination of our forces here with the air operations, those mistakes could cost us more casualties than about anything else I can think of.
Tom Brokaw's been listening intently, and Amman, I'm sure. Tom, you want in?
Briefly, General, can you describe for us how American forces may keep Iraq from attacking Israel after the first wave?
In the initial air campaign, I mentioned that we will have to strike the Scud missiles wherever they are. When they and the Iraqi aircraft are destroyed, I don't think Iraq has any military weaponry that could reach Israel. And even if they use that, the military damage they can do to Israel with those launches is marginal.
Okay. Lieutenant General William Odom, thanks very much. Thank you. We're going to come back in just a moment, but first to another bumper, and we ask the obvious question, why war at all?
The fight isn't about oil. The fight is about naked aggression.
There's no reason my son should have to die to get an Amir back in power, or that someone over here can drive around in a Cadillac.
Why are we there?
Yeah.
To save the oil. That's all.
I don't think anyone really understands why, whatever the reason, it is not good enough. It is not good enough to die for. It is not good enough to kill for.
Unfortunately, the Wagner's new vacuum cleaner was not the most trouble-free in its class. Neither was the new refrigerator, nor the new lawnmower they got such a good deal on. Thank goodness they made one new purchase that was the most trouble-free in its class 2 years running, the Toyota Corolla.
Maybe you ought to just let that lawn die out.
I know what you do for me, Toyota.
Roger just can't stop talking about the terrific taste of new Arm & Hammer Dental Care Gel. Right, Roger?
Mm-hmm.
It has the cool taste of freshly picked mint, doesn't it, Roger?
Mm-hmm.
And it has the baking soda our dentist recommended. We'll never go back to our old gel, will we, Roger?
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm. New Arm & Hammer Dental Care Gel or paste from the baking soda experts. Anything else you'd like to add, Roger? Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
I'm a second-half quarterback. Am I not?
Well, that was a stellar performance.
Super buckets.
Here, have some chicken. You look weak.
His arm is weak. Called aging.
From Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Trivia, guys. Who has the record for most fumbles? You mean before today?
15 pieces of chicken or a supersized bucket of hot wings, just $9.99 each.
Wait till the second half.
All right, rally.
Anytime you're ready, gentlemen.
Super buckets from KFC.
Come on.
More vitamin C than this. Twice the magnesium as this. More vitamin A and beta-carotene than this. This much iron times 8. And 2 times the vitamin B1 is this. After putting in 30 vitamins and minerals, we didn't have room for artificial colors, flavors, or preservatives. Introducing Essential Balance from Nature Made, a complete, more natural multivitamin supplement. Why would you consider anything else?
Iraqi tank. Baghdad will not give up an inch.
Hitler revisited
The threat of war.
use of force. Military buildup in northern Saudi Arabia.
About oil. The fight is about
The hope for peace. Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes, count on NBC News.
America, Are We Ready for War continues. Here again is Bryant Gumbel.
Wise men, or the lack thereof, is the subject of John Chancellor's commentary this evening. Good evening, John.
Bryant. At this hour, there's not much that's clear about this crisis, yet there is one thing historians will note. The United States is getting close to